Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven speaking to you from Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 24th day of the month of Sivan 5780, June 16th, 2020. This week in Israel we are reading Parshat Korach from Numbers 16:1 through 18:32. However, in the diaspora you're still 1 week behind and you will be reading Parshat Shlach, Numbers 13:1 through 15:41. This discrepancy, I'll remind you, will continue another 2 weeks. Next week we will be proceeding on to Parshat Chukat, while the diaspora will be just beginning to read Korach. And then the following week, Parshat Balak for us will be a double parsha. It's a big one, a big double parsha for the diaspora, Chukat and Balak, and then we'll be on the same page again, and we won't be so, I don't know what the word is, all over the place. But actually the discrepancy kind of works out for us because we get to speak about last week's parsha from my vantage point and this week's, and there's a relationship between them. There's a cause and effect, it seems to me. So it's good to have this 2 week overview of the Parshiot at this time, especially. I think it's advantageous for us. This coming Shabbat also is Shabbat Mevarachin, in which we'll be making a special blessing for the upcoming new month of Tammuz, which begins on, it's a two-day Rosh Chodesh, begins on Monday night through Tuesday, and Tuesday night through Wednesday. Tuesday night is actually the first day of the new month of Tammuz. Monday night being the last day of Sivan. And of course Tammuz is a very, very charged month, and we'll be talking about it next week at greater length, because actually when I record next week, God willing, it will be Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. So we are in the final week of the month of Sivan, the month that began with receiving Torah at Sinai, and now we are segueing our way into summertime. We also recall that the spies, the 12 spies that left the Israelite encampment in order to check out the land of Canaan, actually they weren't spies, it was more like a delegation, a fact-finding mission of 12 notables, leaders of the tribes. They left on the final day of Sivan, right? So they left on what will be for us next week, Rosh Chodesh, first day of Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, the final day of Sivan. They were in the land of Israel for the entire month of Tammuz, and of course gave their dibat haaretz, their evil report on the land, on the 9th of Av. And we all know what that's all about. And so that was 40 days altogether. 40 days that they were in the land of Israel. And of course that corresponds to the 40 years that Israel would be stuck in the desert due to the evil report that they brought back and that the people basically embraced. The big national meltdown that occurred when they returned with their report. And of course, the cause of the breakdown was not the facts that they brought back, because everything that they brought back, all the facts that they came back with, the topography and the flora and the fauna and the sizes of the cities and whether they were fortified or not, that was all fact. But upon concluding the factual portion of their report, they took it upon themselves to give their own opinions, which was negative. We can't do it. The land eats its inhabitants. And that, of course, was the beginning of the meltdown. And so, of course, one of the things we learn is that we are not to speak evil of the land. It's no less a sin than speaking evil of other people. And so it behooves us to always say good things about the land of Israel, and in past years we have made it our mission through our social media, the Temple Institute, to say something good about the land of Israel every day. Show something good, a beautiful photograph, say something good, usually something from the Torah, something from Tanakh, from the scriptures, about the land of Israel, to see and say good about Israel every day, especially throughout the month of Tammuz, in order to rectify the sin of the spies. And because it's for once and for all, we need to push past this in our history. And of course, pushing past it means building the Holy Temple, because it's the last spiritual blockage from our perspective that's holding us back. So we haven't done it every year, but this year we're going to renew that daily project, a daily posting on our social media, and it's exceedingly important, especially now more than ever, because as everybody knows, there is just so much negativity in the world today, and it seems like every day there's more, and it's amplified via social media, and all the problems happening in the United States today, and they are reverberating around the world. So it's time to begin to pick ourselves up from our bootstraps by just re-educating ourselves into being positive. If you can say something negative, you can also say something positive. Rabbi Nachman said, if you can break it, you can fix it. And so if the world is broken because we broke it, then we can certainly fix it. And if we can say something negative, we can certainly turn it around and say something positive. And you know what? When we begin to fill the airwaves with positive energy as opposed to negative energy, I think the world can surge forward, and we can begin to meet these goals that we all hold dear, and begin to repair our world in a big way. Just a quick update. Corona is still with us. It's not so much in the news today as it once was, because there's so much else in the news, but also because people kind of, get bored with it. Let's move on. Enough already. We did the Corona. Well, it's not over yet. Israel has seen an uptick in the cases of Corona. A few weeks ago, at the time that our lockdown was ending, we had literally a handful of new cases each day for about 2 weeks, less than 10 many days. Since then, people are back out, businesses are open, public places are open, and many people aren't wearing masks. And I know some people think masks are, evil, they're a nuisance. More and more reports come out. You know what? To me, it's like wearing a hat in the winter. It can't hurt. And it seems like it really can help. And if more people wore masks, in my opinion, we'd have a lower number. But we are close to 200 new cases a day in Israel for the past couple of weeks, which is borderline very serious. Because if it grows, then the government may begin to reimpose certain lockdown measures again. And certainly they have slowed down some of the stages of the reopening of the economy and of our social lives and leisure lives. They've slowed it down because of the rising numbers. They're not growing, geometrically like was happening at the very beginning of the Corona episode. But it's serious, and we are still being very careful. Those of us who are being very careful, I'm being very careful, because I can do without it. So that's Corona. What else is in the news here before we move on to the Parshat, the Torah readings? There is the deal of the century, which of course was received here in Israel with much joy and happiness from those of us who are loyal to the land of Israel, the right wing, as it were, and we of course embrace the idea of applying Israeli law to the Jordan Valley and to the different Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria. But the more that we study the plan and the map, there are certain communities that are excluded from the map, or they are going to be islands inside a potential Palestinian state, which is one of the later stages that the deal of the century calls for. And so there's a controversy now. There are settlement leaders who say, let's take what we can get and we will, fight for more. And others say it's a honey trap. We take this and we're agreeing, as it were, to a Palestinian state, a terror state within the heartland of Israel. And of course, many historic sites, many important sites, dear to the Jewish people, important historical sites have been excluded, and they would be part of this projected Palestinian state. So the controversy continues, and Netanyahu is determined to begin to apply sovereignty in some areas. We'll see what's going to happen. Again, the argument is practical and ideological. Practical says we have an American government who's willing to recognize Israeli sovereignty over certain areas. Let's grab it. This is what David Ben Gurion did in 1948, when after the UN partition plan, Israel declared a state, knowing that it was much less land than what Israel had hoped for, and what the leadership had hoped for, but it was something, and Israel had nothing at the time. And of course, the Arabs rejected what was proposed to be a Palestinian state, or an Arab state at the time, because the only people who referred to themselves as Palestinians at the time were the Jewish residents of the land of Israel. So Arab armies invaded. Israel ended up conquering and winning much more territory than was originally allotted to them. And then, of course, 19 years later, 1967, Israel completed the takeover of Jerusalem and Samaria and Judea, known to much of the world as the West Bank. So those who say, let's be practical like Ben Gurion, there's a lot to that. There's a lot to that argument. Others say, he was basically, he had nothing to lose, but we do have something to lose, and we have to be careful. So it's a very intense debate, and we'll see what's going to be. It's also relevant to Parshat Shlach, the story of the 12 Meraglim, the 12 spies, the 12 men who were handpicked by Moshe, or handpicked by Hashem, to lead this mission. And they didn't come back and say, well, you know what, some things might be tough, but other things we can easily occupy and move into. They just said, whoa, we can't do it. Let's just trash the whole idea, and go back to Egypt. Yes, let's just go back to Egypt. People became so despondent because of their reports. We had a sneak preview in the parsha before Shalach B'halotcha. At the very end, there was this Lashon Hara, this evil speak spoken by Miriam and Aaron against their brother Moshe, which Hashem, God, took great umbrage to and defended Moshe very, very mightily. And the foreshadowing here is, again, it's Lashon Hara. Like, it's dangerous. It's dangerous, people, to speak badly. It's dangerous to just see the negative. We need to build bridges between one another. We need to build bridges between ourselves and God. And certainly we need to build bridges between ourselves and the land of Israel. So that was a bit of foreshadowing. And here, the spies came back. And nothing. Again, they reported the facts. They said it's a land of milk and honey. They said that. It's exactly what God promised, they said. But we can't do it. Who are we? And then you know what the giveaway was? When they said that we are as we as are grasshoppers in our eyes. I'm looking right now for the very verse. When they see we were as grasshoppers in our eyes, and so we were in their eyes. I just want to find it because it's the crucial verse. Yes, it's Numbers chapter 13, verse 33. There we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which is Hebrew for giant, descended from the giants. In our eyes, we seemed like grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes. Okay. They seemed like grasshoppers in their own eyes. They had a problem with self-confidence, with self-image, to the point where they were projecting their own lack of self-confidence into the eyes of the residents who they never spoke to. They never said to the residents, what do you think of us? And the sons of the Anak, the giants, said, oh, you're like grasshoppers in our eyes. They never did that. They just projected. So what does this lack of self-confidence really tell us? It means they lacked faith in Hashem. If you don't have faith in Hashem, how can you have faith in yourself? And if you don't have faith in yourself, how can you have faith in Hashem? It's just like, how can you love another person if you don't love yourself? Right? Love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't love yourself, the good and the bad in yourself, if you don't love yourself and embrace yourself, you can't love and embrace others. If you don't love and trust Hashem and put your faith in Hashem, then you cannot love and trust yourself and put your faith in yourself that you can accomplish the mission that Hashem has told you, that has set out for you, that Hashem has said explicitly you can do it. So the real sin here, which led to the dibat haaretz, the speaking evil, speaking ill of the land, right? The real sin that led to the evil speech was lack of faith in oneself, lack of faith in Hashem. Which comes first? It's like the chicken and the egg. Which comes first? I don't know. But if you don't have one, you don't have the other. And if you don't have one or the other, then that's when Lashon Hara, that's when evil speaks, that's when we start to deprecate others. That's when we can say a bad thing about the government, about the land, about my neighbor, about this person on TV. Again, nobody's perfect. I'm not saying, it's not peaches and cream. You don't just look at people and say, oh, they're wonderful, they're sweet. No. But we look for the good. We look for the godly in everyone. And if you can find it in somebody else, you can certainly find it in yourself. And if you can find it in yourself, you can certainly find it in someone else. And certainly, when God Himself, our Creator, says, you can do it, He knows what He's talking about. And so to say, I can't do it, is to say, no, your creation didn't come up to your standards, and that means that God created a substandard creation, and that is already an implication on God Himself. There's a famous story from the Talmud. I don't remember the names, forgive me, but a famous rabbi was walking. He saw a man who was very unattractive. And he said, whoa, you're an ugly person. And the man said to him, don't tell it to me, tell it to me to He who created me. You got a problem with my looks? Take it up to my Creator. Take it up with my Creator. He's the one. God is the one who made me. And the sage who said these words was admonished and understood. He learned his lesson. Before you trash another person, realize that God created that person. Before you trash the land of Israel or anything else, remember that God created what you are trashing, and you really might want to think twice before you say anything more. And again, the tikkun, the correction, the rectification is simple. Say something positive. You know what? It's just as easy, probably easier, once we begin to gear ourselves and train our eyes and our mouths and our tongue and our ears to positivity, to seeing the positive. You know, we can filter out the negative and speak and pronounce the positive and inject that positivity into the conversation, into the atmosphere, into the world. And you know what? It's contagious. And I guarantee you, and trust me on this one little thing, the more positivity that you exude, the more that you will receive, and the more that those people to whom you show positivity, they will carry it forth to other people. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox. That's what I got to say about that. But again, this was the real chet, the real sin of the spies, the 10 spies, because of course Yoshua and Kalev ben Yefuneh, they said, what are you talking about? We surely can do it. God promised us, and if God said so, we can do it. It's a very, very good land. Again, they immediately turned it around. They said, it's a very, Eretz Tov Ma'od Ma'od, very, very good land. Again, they reflected the Tov Ma'od. This is what God said at the conclusion of creation, the 7 days. God said, it's very good. And they're reminding people by saying that God created this land, and He created it in those first 7 days. In fact, the first Rashi, the first commentary by the sage, the great commentator Rashi, in the first verse of the Torah, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, Rashi said, why does it mention this now? Why don't we start with the first commandment, which was Rosh Chodesh, the new moon? We learned in the book of Exodus, especially before Israel left Egypt. God said, you mark the new moon. That was the first commandment to the people of Israel. No, He said God created the heavens and the earth, Aretz, same word for land, the land of Israel. God created that first day the land of Israel, and now He's giving it to us. Do not denigrate it. Here's the music. I'll be right back. Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. It's Ruben speaking from Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 24th day of the month of Sivan, 5780, June 16th, 2020. A quick reminder, this coming Shabbat is Shabbat Mavarchim, in which we bless the upcoming new month / new moon of Tammuz, which is a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, beginning Sunday night, Monday, Sunday night, Monday, and Monday night, Tuesday. Monday night, Tuesday actually being the first day of Tammuz. And we've been talking about Parashat Shalach. We're going to segue right now into Parashat Korach, because of course there is currently a discrepancy. We in Israel are 1 week ahead of you in a diaspora. That discrepancy occurred on Shavuot, and it's going to conclude in another 2 weeks. But in the meantime, we are a week ahead. So this week, I'm studying Parshat Korach, which we'll be reading this week in Shabbat. But everybody outside of the land of Israel is still studying Parshat Shalach, and we'll be reading that in this coming Shabbat. So this Temple Talk, we are talking about both. And we are about to get into the big segue right now. But just before we talk about that, I gave you a quick update on the Corona. We gave you a quick update on the deal of the century, the debate that's taking place here in Israel. And now just a quick update on the Temple Mount, which has been open now for 2 weeks. And many Jews are going up to the Temple Mount again, picking up where it left off. And the numbers, again, for any given day, the numbers are larger than they were a year ago. Again, 70 days. For 70 days, not a single Jew was allowed up in the Temple Mount. But now we're back up. And anybody who follows our Facebook for sure, saw last week's crazy story about a young Jewish woman who went up to the Temple Mount, not in a group of visibly religious Jews who are escorted by the police and just go in certain areas, etc., but she went up, quote, as a tourist, and she was giving a live Facebook broadcast, and she was talking about the history of the first temple, the second temple, and a Waqf guard, official, whatever, crony, overheard her and stopped her and said, you're not allowed to talk about the first temple or the second temple because it didn't exist. And it's been a mosque here since the time of Adam, and he removed her from the Temple Mount. This became a big story. And he actually this week was called in to the police for questioning. I don't know what the outcome is, but of course this was a cold shower for a lot of people. What? Really? How can they do that? What? You can't mention the temple on the Temple Mount? Yeah, anybody who follows the Temple Institute, who follows their Facebook, anybody who follows what's happening in the Temple Mount, you know the story, you know the drill. It's crazy, it's ridiculous, it's insane, and the fact that the Israeli government puts up with this nonsense, which originates with the Jordanian government, with whom we have a peace agreement, it's crazy. I could say it until I turn blue. It's not going to change it. The only thing that's going to change it is, again, more and more Jews going up and insisting on their right to be there and to pray, and expanding the circle of people who go up and talking about it and teaching about it and getting more and more people involved. And again, there are members of Knesset and public people who have taken an interest, and they're working hard to slowly, hopefully improve the situation. There's a bottleneck here in that any change in policy is up to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has his considerations and is very reluctant. We have seen over the many years that he's been Prime Minister to introduce anything but very slight incremental change. But anyway, many Jews are going up, and those that are going up recognizably as Jews have been reporting on, very relaxed atmosphere. There's tefillah, there's prayer up there, open prayer. Situation is better than it was a year ago, certainly 1,000 times better than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And but the important thing is that there is Jewish presence again, and that it is growing all the time. And it's not just religious Jews, and it's not just one type of religious Jew. It's all types of religious Jews. It's all types of Jews, and of course, non-Jews are also back up on the Temple Mount now. And everybody's welcome because it's a house of prayer for all nations. This is what it was always intended to be. This is what Shlomo, when he first built and dedicated the first temple, he said, people will come from afar to go up to our temple and to pray to God. So that's what we're still working toward. Okay, Shalach. We got to the great meltdown. The people wanted to go back to Egypt. God said, you know what? I'm tired of these people. I just want to start all over. Moshe, let me just start with a new people that you can lead. Moshe, again, just like with the golden calf, Moshe stepped in and said, God, you can't do that. What are the Goyim going to say? What are the nations going to say? They're going to say, God took him out of Egypt, but God couldn't bring him into the land. You know what? That's how serious our Lashon Hara against ourselves was when we said we were like grasshoppers, because it reflected on God's ability, as it were, to bring us into the land. So it's as if we were saying, as if the 10 of the 12 spies, and then the nation of Israel that went along with it, were saying, yeah, God can't do it. Yeah, he can't do it. Nah, he's not, what kind of a guy? Not such a big God. God forbid. So God says, okay, you know what? You're going to go into the land as planned, but not today, not tomorrow, not for another 40 years, not till every one of you people who said, what's going to happen to our wives and children when we go in? They'll be slaughtered. He said, they're the ones who are going to go in. You're not going to go in. You're all going to die in the desert. And yes, that's what happened. Slowly, every year. In fact, according to Midrash, it was every year on the 9th of Av, the anniversary of the day that the 12 spies came back. Every year on that day, a certain amount of this older generation, people who were above the age of 20 at the time of the evil report, would die. They would die off until finally, after 40 years, the last ones had died off. And the people who entered into the land were that younger generation that didn't, have this self-image of being a minuscule grasshopper. And the women, yes, all the women, the older women, a lot of widows went into the land of Israel with Joshua because they were not also part of the Dibat Haaretz. They also didn't succumb to the evil speak and have a spiritual meltdown like the men did. Okay, next, Korach. This week's Torah reading here in the land of Israel, which begins in the book of Numbers, chapter 16, verse 1. And you know what? You read the first two words and you know something's up. The first two words in Hebrew, I should say. Because what are the first two words? Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi v'Datan v'Aviram b'nei Eliyav v'On v'Felot b'nei Reuven. Okay, the first two words, Vayikach Korach. And Korach took. Right? In Hebrew, Vayikach is the first word, and he took. There's givers in the world, and there's takers. And you know what? Korach was a taker. He was taking advantage of a situation as he saw it, and he wanted to take what he thought was his, and what he thought was his was a whole lot. And his way of trying to acquire what he thought was due to him was insurrection. It was basically populism. He was going to get the people behind him and face off with Moshe and Aaron and God. And this is exactly what he did. So he's the diametric opposite of the 10 spies who said we're like grasshoppers, who lacked confidence in themselves and therefore reflected a lack of confidence and faith in Hashem. He was full of himself. So full of himself that ultimately there was no room in his world, even not only for Moshe and Aaron, who he wanted to usurp, but also for Hashem. The world wasn't big enough for the both of them. Korach wanted it all. He was very clever how he went about it. He rallied the people behind him. He got a few hundred people in his assembly, and they confronted Moshe. Let's read the first few verses from, again, chapter 16, Numbers. Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahat, the son of Levi, took himself to one side along with Datan and Aviram, the sons of Eliav, and On, the son of Pelet, descendants of Reuven. We'll find out why these descendants of Reuven aligned themselves with him in a minute. They confronted Moshe together with 250 men from the children of Israel, chieftains of the congregation, representatives of the assembly, men of repute. Big shots. They assembled against Moshe and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourselves, for the entire congregation are all holy, and Hashem is in their midst. So why do you raise yourselves above Hashem's assembly?" Wow, what a message. You can't argue with the fact that we're all holy, right? That's who he knew that's what he was going to do. He was going to get Moshe where he knew he could. We're all holy. Right? We're all God's children. God says we're all holy. We're a nation of holy people. So you might say, well, you know what? there's something to what he's saying. And of course, those 250 people who he assembled all said to themselves, there's something to what he's saying. We're all holy. So why aren't we all in charge? Now, and by the way, these sons of Reuven, now Reuven was the firstborn. From an earlier tradition, the firstborn child would be the Kohanim. He would be the Kohen. His children would be the Kohanim. They would be the priests in the temple. So they responded to his call here. Also, it happened that the tribal encampment of Reuven was right next to the tribal encampment of the family of Kahat, which was the family from which Korach came from. So they were neighbors. So obviously they were the first people who would have heard his doctrine, his political doctrine, and that's really what it was. Because ultimately, we see very quickly, he wasn't talking from a sincere place. He wasn't talking from a place of righteousness. On the contrary, he was being manipulative to the extreme. And he used this argument, just like any demagogue and any populist can rally the people, more power to the people. We should be in charge. Why is that one in charge? Why is he in charge? But basically, it became very clear to Moshe. And we said, I've read the first 3 verses. The 4th verse says, Moshe heard and fell on his face. First thing Moshe did was fall on his face. When he fell on his face, what does that mean? It means he's deep in prayer. First of all, he's humbling himself. He's on the ground. He's on the dirt. He's humbling himself. He's humbling himself not before Korach. He's humbling himself before God. And it appears that when he stands up again, that he has received some form of insight, of inspiration, that God spoke to him. Because he speaks to Korach in verse 5. He spoke to Korach and he says to all his company, saying, in the morning, Hashem will make known who is his and who is holy, and he will draw them near to him. And the one he chooses, he will draw near to him. So he wasn't flustered. He wasn't flabbergasted. He wasn't taken aback. He wasn't in shock. Yes, for a moment, he was in shock. But he got up and he took the battle right back to Korach. In fact, he took the battle. Korach wanted to move the battle into Moshe's turf. Moshe, the humblest man on earth, right? I'm going to hit him where it hurts. What, he's going to say to me now that he's more holy than anybody else? Of course Moshe's not going to say that, no. But Moshe took the battle right back to Korach and his congregation, right? In Hebrew, it's Korach ve'adato, right? In fact, he doesn't even talk to Korach directly anymore. It's always talking at Korach. He's lost all respect for Korach. Because it's clear that Korach doesn't give a hoot about these 250 people. He doesn't care. He's not asking for there to be some kind of, free-for-all, some kind of great assembly, where everybody's going to, be equal and in charge somehow. How does that work? It's chaos. It's anarchy. Yeah. So relevant to what's going on today in the world. These people who are, want to tear down the government, want to tear down the police, want to tear down any sign of an institution, of a system of checks and balances. Why? Because everybody should be in charge. We're all equal. We're all holy. They say today, we're all not holy. Because basically, what they're saying today is what Korach was saying, which is, there's no God here. Like, forget God. You know what? Korach, he wanted to take over, and he wanted to bring the people back to Egypt. He says so. God's plan, not going to happen, not interested in it happening. So he took things a very, very, very drastic step further than the spies. They came from a place of weakness. He's coming from a real evil place. He sees an opportunity here. You know what? Moshe's not leading us into Egypt, not anytime soon at least. We're not going anywhere. My generation, he says, we're dead in the water, or more specifically, dead in the desert. They're not going anywhere. They're going to die there. What has he got to lose? Why shouldn't he be in charge? And if he's in charge, why not bring the people back to Egypt? Maybe he figured he'd be hailed as a hero if he took the people back to Egypt. Pharaoh would say, whoa, I'm going to appoint Korach as my second in command, because he brought the people back. I don't know what his thoughts were, what his plans were, but he was thinking only for number one, and number one was Korach. He didn't give a hoot about the people who he gathered around him. It was all, just a bunch of malarkey that he was feeding them, that somehow, they all were going to become priests, and he didn't want to just become a Kohen, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. He didn't just want to replace Aaron, he wanted to replace Moshe as well. He wanted all the power. He wanted all the honor in his own person. He wasn't willing to share with anybody, let alone a bunch of fools who he was able to assemble to confront Moshe, to a mob, to, intimidate Moshe, God's prophet, the most faithful servant in God's house, the man who ascended Sinai, and brought down the Torah. He was just going to get rid of him. He was a cousin of Moshe. He was a Levi. In fact, the family of Kahat, of whom he was a son of, their job, we learned earlier, was to carry the vessels, the sacred vessels of the tabernacle, when the camp was broken down and they would travel to a new place. And specifically, Kahat, they would carry the Aron Abrit, they would carry the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is the most holy of all the holy vessels, of all the sacred implements. The holiest is the Ark of the Covenant. From the Ark of the Covenant, from the cherubim, that's where God spoke to Moshe. Right? That's where Aaron would bring the Ketoret, the incense, on Yom Kippur in order to atone for the nation. Moshe would go there to hear from God. Aaron and every high priest that followed would go once a year into the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was, to put down the incense. Korach got to carry it from place to place. If they were journeying for a day, he carried it for a day. If they were journeying for a week, he carried it for a week. He, in theory, or from one perspective, you could say he had the most intimate relationship and the most important job of anybody in the entire nation, and that was to care for safe passage of the Ark of the Covenant. And you know what? It didn't mean a thing to him. There's a midrash that says that Korach, he challenged Moshe. He said, you just talked about the P'til Techelet, about the blue thread that we put in our tzitzit, right? On all of our four cornered garments, right? We just read it at the conclusion of Parshat Shlach. He said, what if you have a garment that's all blue, it's completely techelet? Then what? He was trying to trip him up. But what's interesting is there is a garment that's all blue. It's the garment that we use. It's the fabric that we use to cover the Ark of the Covenant when we carry it from one place to the other. So you know what? He was thinking all this time as he was carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and he wasn't thinking about, wow, this is amazing. I'm the most blessed, the most fortunate man on earth. He wasn't thinking that way. He wasn't thinking positive. He was thinking negative. Oh, wow, what can I get out of this? How can I aggrandize myself more? How can I take over? How can I take advantage of the fact that right now we're not going anywhere for 40 years? Right now, Moshe, there's been a chink in his armor, as it were. He's not the guy who's going to lead us today or tomorrow into the land of Israel. And maybe never. So now's my chance to take over. Now's my chance to be the head honcho. Again, what was his ultimate punishment? He and his congregation all were swallowed up by the earth. And you know what? He said, basically, there's no room for God in my plans. In my world, in the world of Korach, there's no room for God. So guess what? He got put in his own world, inside the earth, buried alive, where there's no room for anybody but him and his cohorts. And they say, Midrash says, a legend says that to this day, if you find that spot in the earth, in the desert where he's buried, and some people have found it, and you put your head to the earth, you can hear Korach and his people saying, the Torah is true, and Moshe is true, and God is true. That's all he's got to say. He was wrong. He discovered that a little too late. Thank you for being with me. It's been a pleasure from my part. Temple Talk.